Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal as the storyline unfolded on August 26th. The world of General Hospital spiraled into an intricate web of espionage, betrayal, and irreversible consequences. The shadowy presence of the WSB loomed larger than ever, its darkest secrets inching closer to the surface, threatening to consume everyone entangled in its schemes. Deep within a dimly lit basement, Rick Lansing awoke in terror, disoriented and weak, only to realize that he was being held captive by Ava, Alexis, and Christina. His reemergence from unconsciousness was not a moment of relief, but the beginning of a more sinister captivity. The trio had no intention of releasing him. Instead, Rick had become a pawn, a living hostage whose very existence was now tethered to secrets he barely understood but which Ava and Alexis were determined to bury. Meanwhile, Jack Brennan moved recklessly along his chosen path, convinced he still held control over an unraveling operation. His arrogance shielded him from the reality that his empire of half-truths and manipulation was collapsing. Brennan had always believed that fear, intimidation, and carefully calculated moves could keep him one step ahead. Yet what he failed to grasp was how vulnerable he had become to the smallest misstep. He had no way of foreseeing that Josslyn Jax, a young woman he had once dismissed as inexperienced and insignificant, would be the one to push him into the death spiral awaiting him. At his office, Brennan's evening was interrupted by a sudden, unexpected call from Anna Devane. Her voice, slurred and weary, revealed her in a state of intoxication, yet even through her haze, her words carried a gravity that should have shaken Brennan. Anna confessed her fears about Maxie and lamented the toll the WSB had taken on those she loved. She pleaded for Brennan to recognize that dragging Josslyn deeper into espionage would destroy her life. For Anna, Josslyn was not just another operative but a young woman standing at a dangerous threshold, one false move away from losing herself forever. Brennan, however, brushed off the warning. To him, Anna's words were little more than the ramblings of someone too sentimental to endure the ruthlessness of espionage. His confidence blinded him, convincing him that the situation was still under his control. Once Brennan departed for the Brown Dog Bar to confront Anna in person, Colette Moreau seized the opportunity. Slipping back into his office under the cover of silence, her instincts drove her straight to the hidden compartment where the fabled coded lockbox was stored. The lockbox was whispered about in hushed tones, believed to hold not just intelligence but the very core of the WSB's survival. Inside it lay information that could topple the organization, dismantle its operations, and expose its darkest missions to the world. When Colette laid her hands on it, she realized the weight of what she was holding was more than just steel and paper. It was the power to destroy an empire. While Colette plotted her next move, Josslyn's nightmare reached its climax at the Five Poppies Resort. Bound tightly in a suffocating room, she watched in horror as Pascal turned his cruelty toward Vaughn, her only ally in this treacherous world. His agonizing cries filled the room as he was tormented with deliberate precision meant to break Josslyn's resolve. Every scream, every crack of pain, tight in the noose around her willpower. Pascal's cold demand for the code was no longer a threat but an inevitability. Josslyn's resistance, born of determination and loyalty, began to crumble when Vaughn was forced to endure torture meant to scar him forever. Her heart waged war with her training, and in that final, unbearable moment, she chose to speak. The numbers fell from her lips, a chain of digits that carried with them the fate of countless lives. Pascal's satisfaction was immediate, his smile sharp and sinister as he recorded the code with precision. Josslyn's voice shook as she realized the enormity of what she had just surrendered. She had not simply saved Vaughn from the iron sear of torture, she had unlocked the very heart of the WSB. Vaughn's furious reaction came swiftly, his anger directed at her for breaking so quickly. But beneath his harsh exterior lay a hidden language, one meant only for Josslyn. His cryptic repetition of game, set, match revealed itself not as a condemnation but as part of a deeper plan, a coded signal buried in layers of their shared mission. Though Pascal believed he had won, Vaughn's words hinted that what Josslyn had given up might not have been as straightforward as it seemed. Yet the damage was already set in motion. The revelation that the code had been spoken sent shockwaves across the chain of command. When news reached Brennan that Josslyn had cracked under pressure, a dread unlike any he had known before surged through him. His bravado dissolved into panic as he realized what was at stake. The lockbox was no longer secure, its secrets were in play, and control had slipped from his grasp. For the first time, Brennan's certainty shattered. He understood, with terrifying clarity, that the betrayal of one young woman hadn't done everything he thought he could safeguard. The fear that gripped him was not just for his mission but for his life. Brennan's attempt to regain control came too late. As he rushed to confront Colette and seize back the lockbox, he was blindsided by the true cost of his arrogance. The shadows he had long commanded turned against him. In a final, merciless strike, Brennan was silenced. His death was swift, brutal, and left no room for negotiation or redemption. Whether Colette orchestrated it to secure the lockbox for herself, or whether it was Pascal's hand ensuring no one else stood in his way, the result was the same. Jack Brennan's reign ended in blood. His lifeless body marked not just the end of a man but the collapse of the illusion that the WSB could remain unscathed by its own secrets. Colette disappeared into the night with the lockbox, Pascal walked away satisfied with the chaos he had unleashed, and Josslyn sat haunted by the unbearable truth that her voice, her choice, had been the trigger that set the tragedy into motion. Vaughn, torn between anger and loyalty, knew that they now stood at a crossroads. The events of August 26 were not a conclusion but a beginning. Brennan's death, the compromised code, and the secrets of the lockbox created a new storm. For Josslyn, the weight of guilt would follow her, a shadow she could not outrun. For the WSB, the unraveling had just begun. And for those who survived the night, the haunting reality remained. The box was open, the secrets were out, and the blood spilled was only the first price paid. When Colette finally secured the code from Josslyn and applied it to the lockbox, the mechanism clicked open with a heavy finality that echoed like a death knell across the room. What she uncovered inside was not merely information, it was a collection of documents, recordings, and encrypted drives containing decades of WSB operations, names of double agents, covert mission details, and untraceable financial accounts. In the wrong hands, these files could dismantle the entire infrastructure of the organization, unraveling alliances and exposing operatives who had sacrificed everything for their missions. Colette stared at the contents, a mixture of awe and dread washing over her as she realized she now possessed a weapon far more destructive than any firearm or bomb. This was power, raw and unfiltered, and it could destroy or reshape everything in its path. The moment Brennan received word that Josslyn had broken under pressure and revealed the code, the mask of composure he had cultivated for years shattered. Panic coursed through him, cold and consuming, because he knew what that lockbox represented. It wasn't just sensitive material, it was the very core of WSB's survival. If those files fell into the hands of adversaries, every operation, every agent, every shadow negotiation they had conducted would be obliterated. For Brennan, it was no longer about controlling Josslyn or manipulating Colette, it was about salvaging what was left of a crumbling empire and his place within it. He stormed through the corridors, his footsteps frantic, his face pale with the realization that all his careful strategies were disintegrating before his eyes. When he finally reached the dimly lit chamber where Colette stood over the open lockbox, the sight nearly drove him mad. She held the documents like trophies, her eyes gleaming with the dangerous knowledge of what she possessed. Brennan lunged toward her, desperation stripping him of the careful calculation that had once defined him. He shouted accusations, warnings, and promises in a frenzied attempt to reclaim control, but Colette remained composed, almost amused by his unraveling. Her silence was louder than any rebuttal, her steady grip on the files signaling that she had no intention of letting them go. It was in that volatile instant just as Brennan reached for the lockbox that the air shifted. A shadow moved swiftly from the periphery, and before Brennan could react, a sharp and decisive strike ended his struggle. The sound was sickening, final, and absolute. Brennan's body collapsed to the floor with a thud, his eyes wide in a frozen expression of shock, his lips parted as though still attempting to protest. The man who had believed himself untouchable, the architect of countless operations, was reduced to a lifeless shell within seconds. His death carried no fanfare, no final words of defiance, only the brutal silence of inevitability. No one in the room acknowledged who had delivered the fatal blow. Colette did not flinch, as if she had anticipated this outcome all along, while Pascal stood in the shadows with a thin, satisfied smile. The ambiguity of the act was deliberate and was less about the hand that struck him down and more about the inevitability of his fate. It was as though the secrets he had guarded so zealously had turned against him, demanding blood as their price. His fall was not merely the loss of a man but the collapse of an entire illusion he had worked so tirelessly to maintain. With Brennan gone, Colette wasted no time. She gathered the contents of the lockbox with methodical precision, her movements deliberate and devoid of hesitation. Her departure was swift, vanishing into the shadows with the stolen intelligence, leaving only questions and devastation in her wake. Pascal lingered, his expression betraying an unsettling satisfaction as if he had orchestrated every step of the downfall. He had not only broken Josslyn and secured the code, but he had also rid the game board of Brennan, the man whose ambition had long been an obstacle. For Pascal, the evening ended in victory, but for everyone else, it was the beginning of catastrophe. Josslyn, however, bore the heaviest weight. Bound by guilt, her mind replayed the moment she uttered the code, the numbers spilling from her lips like a curse. She had done it to save Vaughn, to end his suffering, but in doing so she had condemned Brennan and unleashed a cascade of chaos that could destroy everything she had tried to protect. The knowledge that her choice had unlocked more than a box, that it had opened the door to bloodshed, betrayal, and instability consumed her. Each beat of her heart echoed with regret, and though Vaughn had tried to shield her with his coded reassurance, the truth was inescapable. She had set this chain of events into motion. Brennan's death was not just the conclusion of a single man's story, but the catalyst for a new chapter of instability and fear. With Colette in possession of the secrets and Pascal watching from the shadows, the WSB's carefully guarded world stood on the brink of collapse. And Josslyn, caught between her instincts and her remorse, would never escape the haunting truth that she had been the one to speak the words that started it all. The death of Jack Brennan was not just the elimination of a single operative or even the fall of one of WSB's most ruthless leaders. It was the spark that ignited a wildfire across the global intelligence landscape. In an instant, the balance of power that the WSB had worked decades to maintain collapsed, leaving behind a dangerous vacuum that rivals, enemies, and even allies were eager to exploit. What had begun as an internal operation marred by arrogance and secrecy had now escalated into a full-scale crisis that no one could control. And at the center of it all were three fractured lives: Josslyn, Vaughn, and Anna. For Josslyn, the aftermath of Brennan's death was a descent into guilt and paranoia. She could still hear the sound of the lockbox clicking open, still feel the tremor in her voice as she gave away the code under duress. Her mind replayed Vaughn's screams of agony, the heat of the iron hovering inches from his skin, the desperation that had driven her to sacrifice the mission for his life. Yet even as she tried to justify her choice, the truth clawed at her. She had given their enemies exactly what they needed. She had opened a door that could never again be closed. Worse still, Brennan's death, swift, brutal, and shrouded in mystery, was a direct consequence of the information she had surrendered. Though she had not killed him, the blood was on her hands, and she knew she would never escape the shadow of that knowledge. Vaughn's reaction to Brennan's death was more controlled but no less devastating. As a seasoned operative, he had seen missions unravel and agents fall, but this was different. The WSB's entire foundation had been compromised, and the young recruit at his side had become both a liability and a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. His coded words game set match had been an attempt to reassure Josslyn that their mission still had hidden layers, that perhaps not everything was as lost as it seemed. But even he could not deny the reality. Their network of spies was broken. Operatives across continents would soon be exposed, alliances dismantled, and lives destroyed. Vaughn's role shifted overnight from mentor to survivor, forced to decide whether protecting Josslyn was worth the greater cost of salvaging what little remained of their world. Anna, watching events unfold from her own vantage point, felt her fears harden into an inescapable truth. She had warned Brennan, pleaded with him to step back, to protect Josslyn from the ruthless machinery of espionage. But Brennan had dismissed her concerns, and now his arrogance had cost him his life. For Anna, Brennan's death was both vindication and condemnation, proof that her instincts had been right, but also a reminder that she had failed to act decisively when it might have mattered most. She knew that the agency would not pause to reflect or to mourn. Instead, it would turn inward, devouring itself with suspicion, vengeance, and power struggles. She braced herself for the inevitable, a purge within the WSB, a hunt for traitors, and a desperate scramble to reclaim what had been lost. Across the globe, the ripple effects of Brennan's demise spread with alarming speed. Intelligence agencies that had once respected or feared the WSB suddenly sensed vulnerability. Rival organizations began mobilizing their resources, eager to seize the secrets rumored to be in Colette's possession. Black markets buzzed with whispers of encrypted drives and files that could reveal the identities of embedded agents, weapons caches, and covert deals spanning decades. Foreign governments, long kept at bay by WSB's invisible hand, began plotting their revenge, seeing this as the perfect moment to destabilize their old enemy. The death of Brennan had not only shaken WSB's core but destabilized the entire architecture of international espionage. Inside the WSB itself, chaos reigned. Leaders who had once moved in lockstep began turning on one another, each convinced that betrayal was festering in their ranks. Some insisted that Colette had acted alone, a rogue agent blinded by greed. Others suspected that Brennan himself had been part of a larger conspiracy, his death staged to cover his tracks. Still others whispered that the lockbox had been a trap all along, designed to flush out enemies within the organization. The atmosphere was toxic with paranoia, agents watching each other more closely than their enemies. The very trust that had once made the WSB formidable was gone, replaced by suspicion so thick it paralyzed decision-making. Meanwhile, Colette disappeared into the shadows with her prize. She understood better than anyone the magnitude of what she carried. In her hands was not just information but leverage enough to command the loyalty of nations, to blackmail governments, to destabilize the entire intelligence community. Whether she intended to use it for personal gain, to sell it to the highest bidder, or to wage her own private war remained unclear. But one fact was certain, her possession of the lockbox had shifted the balance of power irreversibly. She had become a phantom threat, a figure whose next move could determine the future of the world's most powerful espionage network. For Josslyn, every hour after Brennan's death was a battle against herself. She questioned whether Vaughn truly believed in her or if he simply tolerated her presence because she had become too entangled to discard. She wondered if Anna would see her as a victim or as the architect of Brennan's downfall. Most of all, she feared what the WSB would do when they discovered that it was her voice that had unlocked the lockbox. Forgiveness was not a currency the agency traded in. Retribution was far more likely, and Josslyn could feel the weight of that inevitability pressing down on her. Vaughn, though hardened by years in the field, recognized that Josslyn's guilt was both her weakness and her strength. He knew that what she had done could not be undone, but he also saw in her resilience that might yet prove useful. The code she had revealed, the secrets she had unleashed, they were part of a game far larger than either of them could control. Vaughn's mission now became twofold: to protect the young operative who had become a target for every faction in play, and to uncover the truth about who had struck Brennan down. Was it Colette, securing her dominance? Pascal, erasing an obstacle? Or someone even closer to the WSB's heart? Anna, standing at the intersection of loyalty and morality, was forced into an impossible position. Her duty to the WSB demanded that she report everything, but her conscience urged her to protect Josslyn. She had seen too many lives consumed by the agency, too many promising young operatives broken by its relentless demands. Saving Josslyn might mean betraying the WSB, but Anna's heart whispered that it was the only path left that did not end in more destruction. She prepared herself for the inevitable reckoning, knowing that the choices she made in the coming days would define not just her career but her soul. Brennan's death, then, was more than the end of a man. It was the unraveling of an empire and the ignition of a new war. The lockbox had become the most dangerous object in the world, and those who sought it would stop at nothing. Colette had vanished into the night, Pascal reveled in the chaos he had wrought, and the WSB fractured under the weight of its own secrets. In the middle of it all, Josslyn, Vaughn, and Anna found themselves bound together, not by trust but by survival, thrust into a war they had not chosen but could no longer escape. The world of espionage thrives on shadows, but with Brennan's death, the shadows themselves had become unstable, shifting, and unpredictable. What had once been concealed was now exposed. What had once been controlled was now spiraling. And as the echoes of Brennan's last breath faded, a terrifying reality became clear. The war for the lockbox was only beginning, and it would demand sacrifices none of them were prepared to make. In the shadows of the espionage world, the coded lockbox transcended its physical form and became something far greater, and far more terrifying. No longer was it merely a container for documents, hard drives, or operational files. It became a living symbol of betrayal, power, and the devastating cost of flawed choices. Its existence carried the weight of everything the WSB had fought to protect, yet it also exposed the fragility of the very foundation upon which the agency had been built. Those who touched it, who whispered its code, or who killed to possess it, had unknowingly set into motion a cascade of events that would ripple far beyond their own lives, tearing through the heart of international espionage. The lockbox represented betrayal because it revealed how trust, once fractured, could never be repaired. Josslyn's decision to surrender the code, forced by the agonizing sight of Vaughn's torture, stood as a testament to the cruel paradox of espionage, sometimes saving one life condemned countless others. Though she had acted out of desperation and love, her voice had unlocked more than steel. It had enchained betrayal itself. Her loyalty to Vaughn clashed with her duty to the mission, and in that clash, the lockbox became the wedge that divided her from the ideals she had once believed in. It was no longer just an artifact of the agency but a mirror reflecting the collapse of trust between agents, leaders, and the organization itself. It also embodied power, the kind of raw and filtered power that could shape nations and topple empires. Inside were names of double agents, detailed mission logs, clandestine financial networks, and records of every covert operation spanning decades. With such information, governments could blackmail one another, rogue syndicates could dismantle intelligence infrastructures, and mercenaries could sell secrets at prices beyond imagination. Colette, holding the files in her hands, had ascended from a mere operative into a figure capable of commanding the world's most dangerous players. The lockbox gave her not just information but dominion, a weapon far more destructive than bombs or bullets. It was power in its purest, most intoxicating form, and it was now in the hands of someone endowed by loyalty to the WSB. Yet, above all, the lockbox came to symbolize the crushing cost of wrong choices. Brennan's arrogance, his refusal to heed Anna's warnings, and his obsession with control had driven him to his own destruction. His death was not only the punishment of a man but the indictment of an ideology that believed power could shield anyone from consequence. For Josslyn, the lockbox was the burden of guilt she would carry forever, her whispered code echoing like a curse in her mind. For Vaughn, it was the reminder that even seasoned agents could be undone by a single miscalculation. For Anna, it was the haunting confirmation that her fears were justified, and that the machinery of espionage, once set into motion, could devour even those who sought to wield it. Every person touched by the lockbox paid a price, and none would escape unscathed. The fate of the WSB now hung by the thinnest of threads. Each passing hour after Brennan's death heightened the sense of collapse, as enemy organizations began to mobilize, and allies grew restless with suspicion. The lockbox had not simply exposed secrets, it had destabilized an entire network, placing operatives in mortal danger and compromising missions that spanned the globe. Its existence created fractures not only within the agency but within the very concept of global intelligence. The WSB, once feared for its ruthlessness and precision, was now vulnerable, its survival hanging precariously over an abyss. The box was no longer a safeguard of knowledge but the harbinger of chaos. For those who survived that fateful night, the trauma was etched into their souls. Josslyn would forever be haunted by the image of Vaughn's suffering, by her own voice betraying the code, and by the knowledge that her humanity had triggered a chain of bloodshed. Vaughn, though outwardly resilient, would never forget the sensation of helplessness as he watched a young operative sacrifice the mission for him. Anna, staring into the void of her own guilt, would carry the torment of knowing that her warnings had not been enough, that she had watched the collapse without stopping it. Each of them was bound, not by loyalty or trust, but by the scars of what they had endured together. And in the end, all of them, Josslyn, Vaughn, Anna, even Colette, would live beneath the weight of one word that defined their lives from that night forward: secrets. Secrets that could kill. Secrets that could destroy. Secrets that bound them to each other and to the fate of the WSB. They had seen the price of secrets when contained, and they had seen the destruction when unleashed. The lockbox had been opened, the blood had been spilled, and the game had changed forever. For in the dark world of espionage, there are no victories, Only survival, and survival always comes at a cost paid in betrayal, power, and silence.